My name is Dot Porter, and I am the curator for digital research services in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts here in the University of Pennsylvania. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a research and development group in the Kislak Center, and we look at manuscripts and think about manuscripts both digitally and physically. And so Coffee with a Codex, once a week, 30 minutes on a Zoom call, we look at manuscripts both physically and virtually, because you get to see the physical object, but it's still virtual. So I'm always excited to do these, and this one is going to be fun. So when I advertised this, I actually advertised not this manuscript that I put here because it looks very interesting from the outside. This is the one that I advertised. So I'm trying this dual setup, so we'll see how this works. So this is LJS 347. It is a 14th century copy from England of Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. So the Consolation of Philosophy, very, very popular text throughout the Middle Ages from very early, and it's still popular now. I think I saw it's never been out of print since the 15th century. So you can go to your local bookstore, you can go to Amazon, and you can find copies of this book that are still in print because it's that popular. So Boethius lived in the 6th century, and he was a philosopher, and he was accused of treason against I believe it was the Ostrogothic king Theodoric. And so he was sent to prison in 523. And so while he was in prison over this year, that's when he wrote the Consolation of Philosophy. So he actually wrote this while he was basically awaiting execution, and he was eventually executed for treason. And so the text itself, I'll go ahead and open this up so we can have a look while I'm talking, has a really interesting place in sort of the history both of classical and medieval philosophy and theology, because it's not a religious text. So he doesn't really talk about Jesus in this text. It is a dialogue between the narrator, who is basically a fictionalized sort of version of Boethius himself, and he's talking with this character of Lady Philosophy, and she is telling him about, they talk about things like, what do I have it? There's a better, I don't want to say this off the top of my head. But fortune and fate and divine provenance, the relationship between free will and divine foreknowledge. So you can sort of see from that why theologians in the Middle Ages were very interested in this text. And it was copied. I think it first became popular I believe I saw in the 9th century. So like in the 800s, I would guess. Under Charlemagne. It was translated into English by Alfred the Great in the 10th century. So this was a text that was translated, it was copied, it was commented on for a long time. So this manuscript is 14th century English. We know it's English because of the writing. The script is an English script. And as you can see from this page, and as we scroll through, you'll scroll. We're not going to scroll through this. I'm sorry. As I page through it, you'll see that there are a lot of glosses. So there's interlinear glosses, that is words written between the lines, and there's also marginal notes, marginal commentary, and some pretty things like this little manicule, who's a little finger who's sort of pointing out some interesting text that's going on. Very little decoration. Here is one of only a few colored initials here. And what's happening here? Why is this doing this? In addition to being a dialogue, it's also in the form of meter and prose. So there's a prose section and a meter section and a prose section and a meter section. That's not the same as the dialogue. It's not like one of the characters speaks in prose and one of them speaks in meter, but the text does go back and forth between them. So here is where we're moving from a prose section, which you can tell because it's sort of written from margin to margin, to a meter section. In this case, it's actually in 2 columns. They're not all like that. So some of the meter as we go through, we'll see that, oops, that this is you can still tell that it's meter, but it's not in 2 columns like that. So although this one is, and this one is. So maybe I lied. Maybe I'm thinking of the other manuscript where you do see the meter in sort of one section. Well, here's another section. And this is a good one too, because we do see a lot more of this commentary. So here we go. Moving from the prose section to this metrical section. And it also has these sort of marginal notes here. This was a sign, I think, that this manuscript was, used. People used it and studied it. It could have been a text used by a student, and that might be why it's got these glosses and whatnot. Although the glosses in this manuscript don't cover the whole thing. So they're there's a lot more of them towards the front. And then as we head towards the back, there aren't quite so many of them here. So this is LJS 347. And I also want to show you this other one. I originally was just going to show you the one manuscript, but this week I was working on a different project and I happened to come across this one. And I wanted to look at it for a few reasons. One, it's just a really neat manuscript. And I think it's interesting because it shows, it's one thing to sort of say, oh, the Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy was very popular and, there were lots of copies, but then I can show you that, that not only, can I say that, but I can also show you these books from our collections. And in fact, we have these 2 copies. I do believe that these are the only 2 copies that we have. I checked. And although they're both from Europe, the one we just looked at is from England, and this one is from Spain. So a different part of the medieval world. And it's also different in a lot of ways. So this, the LJS manuscript the binding is not particularly interesting. It's a 19th century binding. But this binding is contemporary. So it's this is 15th century. So it's about 100 years later, but the binding is contemporary. So this could have been the original binding, but it's certainly from the same period of time. It is a red vellum over kind of cardboard that is falling apart. And so I'll show you here, the board is actually dividing up into bits and it's sort of coming off there. There is a paste down here, which has writing on it. It's not the Consolation of Philosophy. I'm not actually sure what it is, but it's written on. And you can see it's been chomped on by some worms. What's that? Oh, there's a question from Kelly Evans. Translated Consolation, Elizabeth I translated Consolation when she was a teenager. Would it have been used as an educational translation exercise? You know what, I think that's possible. It was certainly a text that people would have studied, and it was translated a lot. So I mentioned Alfred the Great translated it very early in England. Chaucer translated it into English, in the 14th century. And it was also translated into French. I can't remember, but it was certainly translated a lot. So I could see it being used as a school exercise in various ways. And I mean, I'm sure it's considered a form of rhetoric because of the the dialogue back and forth, and there was a lot in education about that. So here we are on the first page of this manuscript, and it's written on paper. So the other one was written on parchment. So it's in pretty good condition, but paper is not great. You can see there's pieces of it that have been sort of pulled out and missing, and there's a lot of water damage. That's what's happening down here, is it got dropped in a puddle maybe, and it dried. If you've ever gotten a piece of paper wet and then dried it out again, it's never quite the same, right? So that's what's happened here. But we can see it opens up. So this is the start of book 1. I think I said it's in 5 books. So this is the opening of book 1. And similarly, I mean, the text is clearly different, right? The written text is different. I mean, the script, is different. The layout is a bit different. But again, we have the interlinear glosses and the marginal notes. I don't believe, and I couldn't see anything in the catalog, I don't believe that there has been work done actually comparing these 2 copies, which might be interesting to do, to see if there is any similarity between, look at that, between the notes in this one and the notes in the other one. So here we go. This one seems to have more marginal notes than the other one. So if we scoot over here, there's more written in the margins on this side, on this one than on the other one. There was something that is in this one that I thought was pretty interesting. I've mentioned before that in our, we have boxes of material that doesn't all make it into the catalog record. And so it's always fun to look in there, because sometimes there are students who wrote papers that got put in the archive, and then I can read those. And there was a paper that was written in 1983 about this page right here. So as the other copy, right, you've got meter and you've got prose, and the distinction between the meter and prose on the page is distinctive. So here is a section of prose. It's I believe it's the last meter of book 1. It's on 15 recto. And the paper is about this poem has been copied. It was apparently made from another copy where the poem was originally written wrong. So if you read, I haven't tried this, but if you read across or you read down, either way, it doesn't make sense, because there's sections of it that have been copied out of order. And apparently this is one of the fun things about working with manuscripts is this is a way that you can sort of trace copies being made over time. So this was copied from another copy that did this. So the scribe just copied it and wasn't reading it, didn't fix it. And I wanted to compare it with our English copy here, but unfortunately the English copy starts in the middle of book 2. So it doesn't even have this section of book 1. So I got excited about, I can compare them, and then I didn't actually get to compare them. But it's still neat to take a look, and we can see, I'll just kind of page through. And if there's anything you want to point out, you can. I do think this one does seem to have more notes, and it certainly has more manicules, and I love these. Oop, let's see if we can get one of those. These manicules with the red ink. It almost looks like they're wearing like the nail polish on those. I think they're great. It's a little bit prettier than the other one, which is strange considering the condition is not very good. So let's see, keep moving through. The red is really pretty distinctive. There, ooh, there's a face that's been drawn in I think that's a face. Up here, you see that a lot. That's definitely a fun thing to see. Yeah, I think this one is more fun than the other one. Let's see, but to compare the text and to compare the notes would be an interesting project for someone to do. Let's see, yeah, and I think again, no, maybe not. Oh, I saw this. This one has catchwords, which are helpful if you're trying to figure out how the manuscript is put together. So a catchword, if you don't know, is a word that's written usually at the bottom or in the edge or the middle of the last page of a quire. And it helps you, the person who's doing the binding, to see that the quires are in the right order, because this will be the first word of the top of the next page here. So hopefully that's right. I think it is right. It's Gloria. Yeah, it's Gloria Voss or Gloria. Whoa. So this is bound in the correct order, but it can be helpful sometimes if you have catchwords that don't match. It can help you see if something is missing, or if maybe they were bound out of order. You can see that too. Let's see. Are there any questions? You guys have been awfully quiet. I'm missing the initials. The initials were missing in the other one too. It's interesting to see how often that happens. Let's see. I'm gonna go back to the other one. I feel like, let me close this one up. Come on. I don't know if you can hear it because we're using the microphone on my computer and not my phone. But one of the great things about manuscripts sort of in person is you can hear the parchment. Okay, William has a question about, oh, no, you didn't miss it. Why is the English manuscript begin partway through? Yes, there are some quires missing at the start. So probably 2 or 3, I'm just guessing, 2 or 3 quires are missing at the start of the manuscript. And whether they survive somewhere else, or if they were, they've been lost to time, they could have been used, scraped away and exist as a palimpsest somewhere or something else. And then a question from Esha, what might cause the missing initials? So the missing initials are probably usually it happens, the scribal, the writing of the manuscript, I guess, would happen in what you might think of as layers or as sections. So first a scribe would go through and write the main text in the black or brown ink, sort of the main text, and they would leave space for an initial. So if you know that there's going to be an initial to be put in, you leave a little space. And what would normally happen then is either that same scribe or some other scribe would come in and fill in the initial. Sometimes, oftentimes actually, the person who leaves the blank space would write in a little letter in the middle. So as sort of a guide to the person writing that they, that's the letter they need to put in for the initial. And they wouldn't have to like read. So, oh, here's an example of this here. So I think that's here we go up here, and it looks like that's a little letter S. So this is a guide saying, put in the letter S. But sometimes that just didn't happen. Or like in this manuscript, it looks like they got halfway through and then decided maybe there was something else they had to do and they just never got back to it. So that's how you end up with these blank spaces for initials. And it's really, really common, especially in these kind of working documents. It's less common in fancier manuscripts like Bibles or books of hours. Those are more likely to be complete, but these are still like that. Does either volume have a colophon? There is nothing, I believe, I'll double check. I don't think there's anything in either of them, either of the catalogs about a colophon. I'm pretty sure they are both colophonless, so we don't really know about who wrote them beyond what we can tell by the paleographical information. All right, so Annette asks a really great question: what constitutes a quire? So I'm assuming knowledge, and I'm sorry about that. So the word is actually quire, spelled Q-U-I-R-E, quire. It's also called a gathering. And when manuscripts and later printed books, when they're made, what you have is sheets of parchment or paper that are laid out and then folded into little booklets. So here's one, I think we can see this. And this is a particular research interest of mine. And then they're sewn together. So this is right here, this is what we call being in the middle of a quire. So if I zoom down, you can see that this is a single sheet, right? This leaf is physically connected to that one. They're one piece of, it's like if you took a piece of paper and folded it. It's like that. But there's a stack of them. So there's probably 3 other sheets underneath this one, which means that, so this is one sheet that's been folded. So this page or this leaf is physically connected to this one, and so on. In this case, we can see that we're in the middle because in addition to the fact that they're connected, there's thread here because they're all sewn together. They're sewn through the middle and then, here, can you see that? They're sewn through the middle and then they're sewn onto the binding. So that's what's happening here. So when you talk about being at the end, what am I doing here? I want to move the phone. Here we go. Move this up. So, so we're in the middle of the quire, and then when we're at the end, you can see a couple of things. Oh, that's not great. Let's do it on this side instead. Here we go. And here's a gap. So now this is between quires. You can't always see like this. This is pretty loose. We say it's loosely bound, but that's what I'm talking about with the quire. And so the catchword is a word that goes at the end of a quire to match the word that starts the next one. So let's say you're a binder and you accidentally drop all your quires on the floor and they get out of order. This can help you put them back together. Although it's not uncommon to have books with quires bound out of order, and because sometimes people just don't pay attention because they're human and they just don't. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to paste the links back in again. here we go. You all can look at this lovely 19th century binding while I do this. Put the links back in. So if you want to take another look at those records or register for the next couple of weeks, you could do that. There you go. Thank you. Thanks for coming. This was pretty fun. And do let me know if you have specific manuscripts or types of manuscripts you'd be interested in seeing. Our collection is somewhat limited, but anything you have, any ideas you have would be really great. And thanks for coming. And so I will let you have your couple of minutes back, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye.